Why, hello, and thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to come join me to learn about how to use your smartphone to create gorgeous photos. Because I think that a lot of us are convinced that in order to take great food photos, we need to have a DSLR camera, which is simply not true because we have such amazing technology all around us that we can easily implement and use. We just need to know simply how to use them. So this is going to be our agenda of today. The basic debate between iPhone or Android, and also the editing apps that I love and that I use personally when it comes to editing food photos on my phone, the 5 components you need to know to capture amazing smartphone photos as well. So I really hope that this is what you want to learn today, because this is where you're going to learn it. So if that's the case, you've come to the right place. So as far as me, if this is your first introduction to me, my name is Sarah, and I'm originally from Australia, but I do now live in Los Angeles, where it's mostly sunny most of the time. Kind of reminds me of Australia, actually. And then I also have a background in performing. So I grew up as a singer and a dancer, and I didn't actually realize that I was pretty much a videographer as well, because I used to document my entire life and put it on YouTube. And then I kind of took it down because there's a lot of just really old footage of me dancing under my pergola at home in Australia. So I come from this huge performance and storytelling background, which is why I really love photography as well. And the reason why I kind of got into the whole food photography game is because I grew up with a stay-at-home mum who migrated from Poland to Australia, and she baked all the time, pretty much. And she made sure we always had food on the table. So we were very blessed in that kind of sense. And in the process, she taught me how to cook many dishes and also bake. I can't say that I bake as amazing as her, but I definitely know how to take great photos of her creations. But she's definitely given me some of her recipes. So, and then I started exploring with photography, I want to say like 4 years ago, because I was always more on the video side of things. However, I knew if I wanted to expand my value and what I can offer to my clients, I needed to learn how to take photos as well, because as you know, we eat with our eyes, and it's very important to make food look amazing. And in the meantime, with all of this stuff, I've worked with brands including Good Milk Co., To Le Jour Bakery, Al Venice, Sweat CBD, Beignet Box, Caravana Coffee, just to name a few. These are some local restaurants, cafes, natural holistic brands, because I personally am more into the natural holistic living. However, I will shoot any kind of food. Like I'm just about food. I'm an 80-20 kind of person, if you know what that means. It's like 80% clean and 20, we like those sweet treats. So food photography, I believe, should be accessible to all, not just the fancy camera club. Like, that is just a little bit discriminatory. So that is why I'm here to bust the myth. You can absolutely take photos with your iPhone, and I'm going to show you how. So, like I said, you can shoot bomb AF food without editing software, without a studio, without fancy lighting, without the expensive camera, okay? Now, this is a little comparison that I created. This was shot on my iPhone, and then I edited one in my actual phone and then one on the desktop. And as you can see, it's a little bit different. It's not completely that bad. I would say the biggest difference that I could make on the Lightroom edit on my desktop is I could just kind of tweak the colors a bit more, make it a little bit more white, which is kind of my aesthetic that I love to go to, because I just love bright, like more bright and airy kind of colors. So you can't really see that big difference, except maybe a little bit in the oranges. So, and the whites, because yeah. There we go. And I want to ask you a question. I know that we're not necessarily in person with each other, but I want you to ask yourself, how do you rate your food photography from a level 1, which is, oh my God, I need help. Like, trust me, I've been there, and I want to give you a shortcut. So I need help. 10, I feel great. So just think about that while you're kind of going through this little video that I created. I'm going to try and keep it as brief and concise as possible. But your goal, if this is your first time kind of trying to create anything with your smartphone, the goal is just to start. Honestly, you have to just start right now, get into it, really get curious, play around with so many different modes, settings, whatever it is that you need to do to start getting comfortable. The more you know about your piece of equipment, the more you'd know how to implement certain techniques, and then also how to adjust the cameras to your liking. As you know, we live in a visual world. So if you do want to work with food, whether it is you're a food blogger, a personal chef, a personal brand, or a wellness expert trying to create a cookbook, or you do work in hospitality or have a small business in food, you need to create great, outstanding photos, because we do all live in a visual world. We see things we eat with our eyes, and we want to make sure that we shine the best light on our product as possible. Because why would you want to spend all this time creating something so amazing that you know tastes amazing, and then you go and take a shot and you're like, oh my God, like it just doesn't convert people to either buy it or to want to make it and recreate it. So this is what we're here to do, right? And as you know, with the DSLRs, costs freaking add up. I remember when I first bought my camera, it was an investment, and an investment I didn't really have the money for at the time. So I know how it feels. Like it can be up to, you know, $2,500 to $4,000 or $5,000, depending on what kind of camera body you're going to get, what kind of zoom lens you're going to get, what kind of prime lenses you're going to get, and then also your tripods. Tripods are not cheap. Like when I was first looking for a tripod and I looked at the Manfrotto, because it is a very sturdy tripod, I was a little bit shocked how expensive it was. So you don't need to have all of this stuff to start, at least, okay? The whole goal is to start, like we said in the beginning. So now it's time to master the camera in your pocket, okay? So the debate, iPhone versus Android. Now, with the iPhone, what you're going to do is you're going to have a better user experience and access to every app, because this is the thing. With Steve Jobs, his initial idea was to keep the phone very simple and accessible to people that, you know, the older generation can use, the younger generation can use, and that it can help you create quickly. So that was his goal, and that's what he's achieved with the iPhone, and no doubt, like, it's doing a great job. Android, however, they have well, honestly, I think they personally, besides the camera, they have a great battery life, but they do have an overall better quality camera. So it really comes down to what you have and what you feel like is going to work for you. There's no one size fits all. So do I need the newest phone though to have a good camera in the phone? And the honest answer is, oops, I'm going back too far, guys. Not necessarily. Like you only really need probably the iPhone 8 and above, because they're the ones where they've actually like gone in a bit more with their camera lenses and the glass and the overall quality of the camera itself. So if you've got an iPhone 8 and above, you're good. But honestly, even if you don't, what did I say earlier? Just start now, okay? So we're gonna go to smartphone editing apps. Now, if this is your first time trying to find some apps for your phone to edit and you're like, oh my God, there's just so many, it's overwhelming, I would highly, highly recommend these three. So you've got Snapseed, you've got Visco, and you have Lightroom Mobile, which is amazing, honestly. Like you can even take photos inside Lightroom, and then you can straight away edit it from there. And you can honestly like take photos in any of these apps, but I highly recommend if you want to take a good iPhone photo or an Android photo, take it with the native camera, and then, or in like the Lightroom camera setting, and then put it into any of these editing apps. So check that out. So having expensive cameras and fancy apps is nothing for you. Knowing how to photograph properly does, okay? So I'm such a big believer of it's not about what you got, it's what you do with what you got every time, because at the end of the day, like it almost sets a bit of a challenge for you to figure things out. And at the end of the day, as a creative, you're gonna have to solve many problems, whether it is for your own business or for other businesses. So if you know how to work around using a phone as your camera, you're going to be able to master the DSLR when it comes to that stage. So just keep that in mind. Look at these lovely ones, these lovely photos. So this is an expensive camera with paid editing on the left, which was one of my very first few photos that I took. And then the phone camera with free software. And as you can tell, I didn't know a lot going on that left-hand side, from, you know, composition side of things to the actual photo to understanding how to edit it and whatnot. And I had like the fancy things, so it doesn't matter about the fancy stuff, honestly. So, and then on the right, phone camera, free software. Pretty dang nice. So to understand your phone camera, you do need to know some terms. And one of the terms is the mode. What camera mode are you going to be using to be taking your photos? So when you go into your native camera, it's going to have this little bar at the bottom to show what you're going to be shooting in. So you have 4 options, and that's photo, portrait, square, panorama. And panorama, as you may or may not know, it's the very long kind of picture. So for food photography, that doesn't really work. That's more like a landscape thing. So I would eliminate that straight away. Square. Now square is good because you do technically have a square shape that you put into Instagram. However, now you can do vertical photos, which take up more space on the feed. So then you're gonna be seen a little bit more. And then also on a square, you can't really get your compositions as nice as you could in a vertical picture. Your portrait is going to be really nice if you want to play around with blurring out your background, because that's what portrait mode does. And yeah, when you get off this video, you can explore and experiment with that portrait mode and see how that works for you. And then lastly, we have the photo mode, which is the original kind of setting that you normally use to take photos. So photo and portrait are the 2 that I would be playing with. Now, to understand your camera, you need to understand the 3 types of shooting you can do as well. So the first one is flash. And there's a rule of thumb in food photography when it comes to using artificial light. And one of them is to never use flash, because you are simply going to wash out the photo and you're going to make it a very flat image. There's not going to be much dynamic range in the photo. So we don't want to ever use flash, especially from the actual camera phone. The next one is live. So it kind of takes a little bit of like a live video with a still, and that's really not necessary when it comes to food photography, just so you know that you have that kind of type of shooting that is available too, but not necessarily for food photography. HDR, which is high dynamic range. It's going to take multiple photos in different exposures that you can then put together, and well, the phone puts it together for you, and it kind of creates an overall general balance between your highlights, your shadows, and your midtones. So just something to think about that. You can definitely explore with that if you find yourself in a weird light where it might look a little too dark or a little too exposed. You can try putting that on, and then it can adjust accordingly to your situation. We need to master the art of good light. As you may not know or may know, lighting in photography is key. And this is one thing I find that can be very intimidating for people at first. I know for me personally, I wanted to avoid it like the plague. So, but you kind of have to become friends with the light, because the light is going to show off your food in the best way possible. But you need to know, again, what kind of light you need and how to use it. So terms you need to know is your direct and your indirect. So direct light is pretty much when you're looking at your window and the sun is like pretty much in line with the window. And then your indirect light is either going to be something like a cloudy day or when the sun is up a little bit higher during the day. So it's not completely blasting into the window, giving you all these weird shadows and colors. Usually in the morning you'll get more like a blue tone, in the afternoon you get more of that golden tone. So the best kind of light for food photography though is you go indirect, which we were talking about, either on a cloudy day or when it's a little bit higher in the sky, north facing. But honestly, you might not have a window that is north facing. So what do? You're just gonna have to make do with what you got and observe the light in your house and see how it looks during different times of the day, and even experiment. Maybe take a photo in the morning when there's like super direct light, for example, and then take another one in the afternoon when the sun's on the other side of the window. So you can really experiment, and at the end of the day, shadows are kind of fun to play with too. So you can, depending on the mood that you're trying to create and the story you're trying to tell. So here we go. So this is an example of direct light. So as you can see, they have more harsh shadows in the picture. You can really see like what's in the shadows, like even the flowers over there, and how the scone has a bit of a like a dark shadow to it. So that is your direct. And then indirect gives off that softer light where the shadows are a little bit more dispersed. They're not as harsh. They look very pretty and even. Gives it that light and airy look. And then also it's kind of one of the main ways that you want to be shooting your food at the end of the day, because you're trying to recreate, especially if you're working with artificial light, you're trying to recreate natural light, and that's kind of the nicest natural light that appeals to one's eye. So this is your goal. But other terms to know. So you heard about me saying highlights, midtones, and shadows before, but what actually are they, right? So when you're looking at a picture, there is 3 different things that you need to keep in mind, which is the highlights, which is going to be the brightest point in your picture or your piece of food. And it's usually got like either like a little glisten, or it's maybe like a white part in your food. Just the brightest part that you'll find. Your midtone is going to be in between the darkest part and the lightest part. And then, as you know, the shadow is going to be one of the darker sides of your picture. So when this is going to be really important when you're actually trying to expose your picture properly, because you don't want to overexpose your highlights, but you also don't want to underexpose the shadows, which can be a little bit of a challenge sometimes. But there is another rule of thumb to try and always expose for the highlights, because the thing is, if you overexpose the highlights, chances are you're not really going to be able to get that information back in post when you're editing. But if you do underexpose it a little bit, you're able to like bump that up in the editing portion. So the fundamentals of composition, there are some terms that you need to know. So I know a lot of people that have spoken to me recently about their food photography. One of their challenges has been composition. So these are 4 basic terms that you need to know. There are a few more, but these are some of the popular ones. So terms to know, you need to know your framing. So like how you decide to frame the picture. There is this thing called a frame within a frame, which kind of looks like what I've just created here. I created a little frame around the outside, so you can see that there's that frame. And then also inside the initial photo, there's that plate as well that's being framed, and the muffins are being framed around all of that. So that's one thing to look at, and also like how you're actually positioning things inside the frame. Perspective is going to be such an important term to understand, because food, like humans, have their good sides and the bad sides. So you definitely want to keep in mind what perspective you're shooting, what kinds of foods in. And just to give you a bit of an example, so if you're shooting from the top down, you're doing more of like a flat lay shoot. So that means you want to shoot anything, any kind of foods that have more of a flat look to them, or a flat surface, or have details on the top. So that could be something like a flat lay of cookies, brownies, bars, things like that. You can definitely do from a flat lay kind of perspective. The other perspectives are going to be like a straight on shoot. So you're literally like at the same eye level as the food. And this is so great for stackable food. So to see what's inside a sandwich, or to see a stack of pancakes, or to actually see a stack of cookies. So anything that's stackable and has height, you want to be able to show that off from that kind of perspective. And then there's that 45-degree angle, which is kind of an in-between from your above 90 degree and then your straight on shot. This is like generally known as the most common perspective, because you can shoot pretty much any kind of food from this angle, but I do love shooting drinks from this perspective. So just something to keep in mind. Let me see where we're at. So again, these are the different perspectives. So as you can see, the brownies from more of that 45-degree, the sausage pastry has more of a straight on angle, and then the muffins again have that top down flat lay look. We got the rule of thirds. Now this is so helpful, and I wish I had known this a long time ago before I put this on, but on your phone you can actually put the grid, the rule of thirds on there, which is what you see here. is it creates this grid on your camera, so that way you know how to position your food. And where you can see those pink dots is pretty much where you want to situate the main focal points of your photo, because the eye naturally tends to veer into those spaces within a photo. And we as humans look from left to right as well. So that's something to consider and something to play around with. So that top left hand and the bottom right hand tend to be really good positionings to put your foods. And then there's symmetry. So symmetry is basically placing the food in the middle of the shot, so then that way it pretty much mirrors the other side. You remember like when you were a kid and you did those butterfly paintings, or maybe it was just me, but you would paint on one side and then you would fold the paper over, you would open it up, and it'll create like a butterfly kind of painting, and it literally mirrored itself. So that's what you would be doing for symmetry. You would actually have the item right in the middle of the food in the frame, so that way each side of the frame looks mirrored. So just a bit of thinking there. All right, create a unique visual brand. Now, there's many people that see things that they really love, and you know, whether it is more of that dark photography or that light photography, but they don't really understand that there is different unique visual brands you can create, and that are kind of necessary so you can label yourself as that kind of photographer, or to kind of be known for something, at least in the beginning. Because if you're trying to be everything to everybody, you're going to be nothing to nobody. So I would say definitely understand the different visual brands, but definitely start with one and then expand. Or if you're just doing this as a beginner for fun right now, I would say try them all and see what you like. Because, you know, at the end of the day, if you don't try them all and you get stuck with one, you're like spinning your wheels and you might not enjoy it. But we got to enjoy this. So the terms to know: you've got light and bright, which is this one on the far left with the sprinkles on top. It looks pretty white. It looks very airy, looks beautiful, looks very appealing, right? You got the light and moody. So the light and moody is similar to the light and bright, where you do have still like quite bright colors and things like that, but you might have a bit more of a moodier background. But then also on the editing side of things, as you get more advanced when it comes to editing and using your S-curve, you'll be lifting the shadows a little bit, and you'll be dropping the highlights a little bit to give it more of that faded look. So that's what kind of gives it more of that moody light color to it. The next one is dark and bold. As you can see in that picture, everything is pretty dark, but it's still very vibrant. So this is really cool. This is a very fun kind of mood to work with. And if you can master it, amazing, because you can get some really fun, interesting, different shots with this kind of visual brand. And then we got dark and moody, which is pretty much the same as light and moody, but just with darker colors. And then again, you're raising the shadows a little bit and dropping the highlights to create more of that faded look. We're gonna edit like a pro. So when it comes to taking your photo, a lot of you probably think that it should look perfect straight out of the camera. And don't get me wrong, you want to get as much right in camera as possible, so then you can do as little editing as possible, because gosh, it can be a headache if you get things a little bit wrong, whether it's your white balance or your exposure, or who knows what else. You know, there can be a lot of things that go wrong. And trust me, I've experienced them all. I've made some photos super, super blue. I've made some super, super white and never got my information back. So this is where you need to understand how to edit, because there will be situations where conditions won't be perfect. So you'll need to understand what to do. So the terms you need to know is, one is brightness. So it's the amount of light coming into the photo. So when you usually use the brightness slider, it's pretty much adding more white or more black to a photo, all of it as one cohesive picture. So it's brightening up the dark points as well as the light points. Your contrast, however, is the degree of difference between highlights and your shadows. So you have the highlights that we talked about earlier, which is your brightest point of the picture, and then your shadows, which is the darkest point of your picture. And the contrast, what it does, it kind of separates them a little bit more, so you can make your lighter colors a little bit lighter and the darker colors darker. So it's creating more of that contrasty look. And as you start playing with these editing softwares and you're literally just moving that slider up and down in contrast, you'll see for yourself like how drastically the two can contrast each other. It's pretty interesting. Then you have what is called your saturation, which is the amount of intensity a color has. And this most often, I want to say, is affecting like your oranges and your reds, but I mean, it does all round just saturate your entire picture. So say if you do have a lot of greens or a lot of orange, it just makes the intensity of those colors so much harder. And again, it comes down to your own personal flavor, your own personal style, whether or not you need to really adjust the saturation. I try personally not to play around too much with it, and if I do, it's pretty minimal. I usually try and work with the vibrance instead. And then we got hue, which is character of color. So it's orange red versus blue red. So when you go into more advanced, I want to say, apps and softwares like Lightroom, you're going to actually be able to adjust each color individually, which is pretty fun. But you obviously need to you can experiment with it, but you want to kind of know what you're doing with intention too. So you'll see like when it comes to the reds, you can manipulate the red to be more of an orange red or more of a pink red and so forth. So it's really cool to see. You can use it obviously for things like strawberries and things like that, but you want to keep in mind when you're adjusting the hue, which is a mistake that I would sometimes do, and now thankfully I've learned, that you want to observe your food as if you're looking at it in real life. And you want to make sure that the colors that are coming up on the screen are true to color. So you don't want to necessarily be making like purple strawberries, okay? So just keep that in mind. And again, that's just going to take a little bit of tweaking and practice with your own eye to see things that way. And at the end of the day, what style you're going for. So I know that we're not here together live right now, but I would love to hear from you about what one of the takeaways are that you've learned throughout this quick little breakdown about your smartphone. And you can totally do that by responding to one of the emails that I've sent you, or even you can find me on Instagram at Brighton Creative. That is where I post a lot of information about food photography when you're starting out, and some of my own food photos, and also client work, because I personally work mostly with clients as far as food brands and things like that, but I do love working on my own projects as well. So if you want to come join me over there, I would be more than happy to answer any questions, and definitely let me know what you learned about today. And I would be more than happy to guide you through some more tools and techniques and keep giving you so much value when it comes to your smartphone photography, because honestly, there's so much you can do with it, and I would love to be part of your journey. So if there's anything else, do not hesitate. I hope you found this useful. It was a quick breakdown, but there's always something that you can take away, and I would love, again, to hear from you. So again, my name is Sarah. Thank you so much for being here and for your time. And until the next time, I will talk to you soon.